Good morning, class. Today we're going to begin our exploration of poetry and poetic elements. The first thing we're going to do is log into our computers and log into poetry.org. That's poetry.org. And when we log into poetry.org, we will come to the home page. If you notice, it gives the definition of the site. Here you can learn about the history, meaning, and types of poetry, as well as terms often used when reading and studying poetry. And that's really what we're going to be doing in our unit of poetic study. It also gives the definition of poetry. Now, poetry comes from the Greek word poe, meaning I create, and it's an art form in which human language is used for its aesthetic qualities, in addition to or instead of its notional and semantic content. Now, those are a lot of big words. Basically, poetry is the expression of beauty. It's a form of self-expression that encompasses our noticings of the world around us. So, the first thing we're going to do is just move around in the site, and you can do this at your leisure. You can start by looking at what is poetry, move over to terms in poetry, and this is a pretty overwhelming piece of the site. Some of these we're familiar with, others we might be seeing for the first time. Then what we're going to come back to later on in our study is famous poets. Some of these are modern poets, some of them are long gone poets. We've studied Edgar Allan Poe in the past. He should be familiar to you. Also, Emily Dickinson should be familiar to you. Walt Whitman. But we're going to be studying them a little bit later on in our exploration. So that's the first thing we're going to do today. As you're exploring poetry, you're going to be keeping a running log. This running log is going to be stored in your Google Drive. So we're going to log on to our Gmail accounts, and we're going to click on New. Go down to Google Docs, and a new untitled document will appear. What we're going to do is save this. We're going to rename it Poetry Exploration. And here, both independently and in your groups, you're going to be keeping a running log of everything you find interesting within poetry.org and also some of the other sites that we're going to explore today. After you have searched poetry.org, what we're going to do is open up this site. It's a virtual lit lab, and it's housed at Bedford St. Martin's, which is a publishing company. And why we're going to log into this site is because of all of these poetic elements, these elements of poetry. Now, we might have heard of alliteration before, imagery, of course, simile and metaphor. But we're really going to get into our exploration of these elements today. So what you want to do in your groups, because this is where our quiz is going to take place later, is choose a few. And I started with alliteration because I like the sound of it. And you're going to keep a running log of any definition that you're unfamiliar with. So alliteration occurs when the initial sounds of a word beginning either with a consonant or a vowel, we know what consonants and vowels are from kindergarten, are repeated in close succession. So that means when they're repeated right next to each other. For example, Athena and Apollo, Nate never knows, people who pen poetry. After you read over the definition, we're going to go to the alliteration exercise at the bottom. And again, at your leisure, you're going to go through these exercises. Once we've done that, we're going to go back to our Google document and we're going to type in alliteration. And here I would write down my definition and an example. Again, this is your running log. You could set it up however you please, however is easiest to set up for yourself and your group. After we explore elements of poetry for our virtual Lit Lab, we're going to go over to a site called Interactive Sites, housed in the Weebly domain. Now I like this site because, as you can see, there are many exercises to try out your poetry. Here, we're going to go to the first site, and that takes us to a BBC website. You will be able to quiz yourself. This won't count as a grade yet. You'll be able to quiz yourself with your knowledge of poetry. So, for example, read this poem one verse at a time, answering 3 questions about each verse. Once you've got all 3 questions right, you can move on to the next verse. There are 5 verses in all, and here's what it's going to look like. You're going to read the verse. You can listen to it, and then you're going to quiz yourself. If there are any questions, you can find your partner, your buddy partner, and if they are unable to help you, you can always ask me. Please remember to keep your running log at all times. Any questions? Okay, you may begin. Good luck.